Okay, so now that we've completed our collision report, we're going to do the last thing, which is going to do the diagram for it. So I'm going to go up here, View Attachments, and to start my diagram, I'm going to hit New Diagram. So the diagramming software is unique in Sector in that it's not actually built by the Sector team. This was a proprietary software that was supplied, I think, by some Canadian company that is put into Sector for the purpose of diagramming. That being said, this is a really good tool. Everything you're going to need to diagram a collision is in here. And I'm going to show you step by step kind of the details of how to do this. So the first thing when this pops up here is the Scene Wizard. I always cancel out a Scene Wizard. You can draw your roads a lot better on your own. And then it comes to this. So we'll start by going through each of the bars, kind of talk about what the things are. This top bar is your basic toolbar. Your left bar here is your object library. And then down here at the bottom is the detail library for specific items, which we'll go through as we go through this demonstration. On the top bar, you have Print Scene, which allows you to just print the picture that you're drawing right here, either on your Sector printer or a network printer. Cut, copy, paste, delete, and undo. Windows commands also work, so Control-X for cut, Control-V for paste. If you know those and you want to cut and paste things on this diagram as you go, you can use that, or you can use these buttons up here. Red pin color, these are the stock colors. So the red pin color is a default color for all lines you put on here. So if I put a line on here, it's going to be red. If I'm going to be drawing a lot of lines, and let's say I need a lot of black lines, I'll come up here and change this to black, and it allows me to draw all my stock lines in black. So that's just something good to remember if you're going to be drawing a lot of specific lines. Come up here and change this color rather than having to go click on that specific line and then change the color down here. It just takes a lot longer to do it that way. Okay, this is the fill, the brush here. This is a fill, so all the circles and squares you put on here, it'll fill blue. I rarely ever use this one. Text color defaults to black. I've never changed it from black, but if you want to, you can. And object color green, that's the default color for anything you put on here. So if I put a car on here, it comes out green. If I change it to, let's say, yellow, the next car I put on here will come out yellow. Change it to black. Next car I put out as black, so on and so forth. These tools right here are exceptionally helpful if you're doing your diagramming on a laptop. Right now I have a rollerball mouse, which makes this a lot easier. I highly recommend it. If you're trying to do this in the car and all you have is your touchpad for your mouse, these tools are going to be very helpful to you. And here's why. So let me put a road on here. So let's say I'm doing my diagram and all of a sudden I lose it and I don't know where it is. Can't find my diagram. So instead of using that touchpad to try and find it, this big square, little square here, zoom to extents, when I click on it, it'll center my diagram right away. So you don't, if you lose your diagram, don't get frustrated and delete it. Hit that button first, it'll center it for you. This pan tool, when you click on the big hand here, it moves your entire diagram around as one object. So if you have to move it around to maybe get a better angle on it or something, use that pan tool. And the zoom to rectangle, pretty simple. Left click, 10% in, right click, 10% out. Simple stuff. Down here is the select tool. This is the number one tool you will need to use in this entire program. I call this the fail-safe button. Here's the reason why. When I teach this class, quite often people will start doing this. So they're going to put an arrow here. They want this guy to go right. They want him to go eastbound. So they do that. Wait a minute. So they keep trying to click and they start getting frustrated. And this is where people start having issues. If you start doing this or you have errors and you can't figure out how to delete them, come up here, hit the fail-safe button, the select tool. Now you can start clicking on anything in your diagram and deleting it. So if you start getting a lot of errors like that, let go of the mouse, take a deep breath, fail-safe button, the select tool, and start deleting stuff. Next one's the point tool. This puts points on here. I've never used it. Puts a little dot. This is probably the second most important tool in here is the line tool. The line tool, as you might imagine, draws lines. However, it does a whole lot more. So if I'm doing directional lines, you see down here on this detail bar, I have all these options. If I want to put a directional line, let's say I want to make this guy move eastbound, left click your start point, left click your end point, and there's a line. You can also do any type of road markings. So let's say I want to add a bike lane here. Left click for a start point, left click for an end point, and there's a bike lane. Obviously I didn't make it white, so let's do that. Here's your bike lane. If you're doing a construction zone, you see that there's 3 types of cones here. Let's pick this cone and we'll put a start point for a left click for start point, left click end point, cone line. You've got guardrails, median barriers, skid marks for tires, train tracks, gates for residential areas, guardrails, crosswalks, and parking lots. And I'll show you the parking lot real quick. So for parking lots, this is really helpful. You don't have to actually sit there and draw all your lines. A little driveway. I'm going to show you guys all this in a minute. So we'll go to this little tool down here. Here's what this tool does. When I left click start point, left click end point, there's my parking lot. The good thing about these parking lot lines too is this. When I click on them, down here on this detail page, I have all these different options. You notice that, let's say this was angle. Instead of -90, let's make it -45. I can do angle in parking. I can make this a 0 and do it back, angle in only parking like that. I can change the length of the lines. I can change the width between the lines. You don't need to know what all these symbols mean. You just need to know this one right here makes the lines longer. This will spread the width between the lines. This adjusts the angle of these parking stalls, and this adjusts the angle of these parking stalls. So it's just a good tool as opposed to sitting there and drawing an entire parking lot. Okay, so that's the line tool. Now the 3-point arc tool. 3-point arc tool, I'm going to skip this one real quick. 3-point arc tool is very similar to the line tool with one catch. Instead of doing straight lines, I'll left click for a start point, left click for an end point, and the third click, you see this comes out a little bit, the third click, that draws my curve. So your 3-point arc tool is going to be your curved lines. Same thing with cone lines here. Start point, end point, curved cone line. Median barriers, guardrails, railroad tracks, fences, all that stuff is here in the 3-point arc tool. So if you need to do curved lines, remember, left click start point, left click end point, third click is the curve. Text tool, this is pretty self-explanatory. You click on a spot, you put text there. No big deal. To click on the text, you actually have to go back up to your failsafe button and then click on it. Then you can adjust the angle. Let's say I want to label the side street here. You can grab it, move it around, so on and so forth. So that's how you adjust your text. You have to go to the failsafe button before you click on the text to modify it. Image tool. Only thing I'm going to say about image tool is image tool allows you to put images on this diagram. Do not go to Google Maps, grab a picture of a street, and put it on here. A Google Map picture is a snapshot in time. It's not a real-time picture. If you do a Google Map, especially on something serious like a V-assault, and it goes to court, they're going to be able to challenge, was that scene really that way that day? Use the diagramming software instead. That way you're getting a more basic representation of what you're looking at, and you're not worried about those types of issues. Okay, so now I'm going to skip over here to the object library. First place you should come when you start diagramming is Smart Roads Templates. This is where you're going to find all of your intersections, your T-intersections, and your roundabouts. I always recommend trying to build your collision off of the nearest intersection. It's just cleaner, and it allows you to have a point of reference in here. So we're going to build this intersection real quick. I put my Smart Roads templates on here. I'm going to do a 4-way 2-lane intersection. And actually, this particular intersection, I'm going to do a T. Okay, so you notice when I click in the middle of this intersection, you get all these shapes. You got blue squares, yellow squares, green circle. There's also orange squares. Blue squares on any object you put on here, no matter what it is, allow you to move that object around. Green circles allow you to rotate that object around the axis. It's your rotation tool. Yellow squares and orange squares do different things depending on where you are. So in this case, the yellow square, if I pull it out, it adjusts the turn radius here. This is how you add those little islands when you have these types of turns at an intersection. You grab that yellow square and you drag it out. Okay, when you click on individual pieces of the street, you notice you get yellow squares and orange squares. Orange squares add lanes. Yellow squares will either extend this road or change the angle of it. Now, yellow squares are important. Let's say I was going to add another piece of road right here. Just going to grab it real quick to show you. So if I just go to add this piece of road, that's what happens. It just expands out that original piece. If I take this yellow square and I drag this all the way down and then I add that piece, that allows me to add that piece, and now all I have to do, if I need to adjust it, is change that in there, adjust the roads accordingly. So that's how you will add additional pieces. Move it out of the way first, and then add the piece. Let's go back. Okay. You'll also notice in these lanes, when I click on the lines or the lanes, I get different options down here on the bottom. So for this particular intersection, this is actually a double yellow, not a dotted white. Down here on the bottom, you see I have all these options for how to change the line markings. So instead of that, I want to change it to a double white. And then right here, the pin color, if I change it from yellow or white to yellow, now I have a double yellow there. Same thing with this side. Change it to double white. Double yellow. And I've changed my line markings. On this particular intersection I'm drawing right now, this actually doesn't even have a lane. So you'll notice that when I click in the middle of the lane, there's no striping here on this road. If I want to get rid of that stripe, I can do one of two things. I could click on it and change it to gray, or I could do the easier thing, which is to click in this lane right here, down here on the bottom, show road lines. If I uncheck that box, get rid of my road markings. This is obviously easy because it's a small street, but if you get a large street, you don't want to have to gray out every single line. Just do that. It'll gray out the street for you. Okay, so now we are going to move on to putting cars on here. So let me get rid of this one. So single white and single white. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and start putting cars on here. When you build your intersections, I always recommend you build from the ground up. So it's kind of like baking a cake. So for this particular case, I did all of the road the way I wanted it. Then I moved on to doing the striping. Now I'm going to start adding cars, people, signs, so on and so forth. To do that, I come over here. One other menu, it's not going to really apply in this intersection, but one other menu that's really important is the Smart Roads Components menu. This is going to have other pieces of road for you. So your horizontal pieces, vertical pieces, arc pieces of a road, overpasses, underpasses for freeway stuff, crosswalks. I recommend you use the line tool for your crosswalks, but if you want to, you drag these out. You notice they come out dotted this way, but when you drag it onto a road and let go, it'll automatically adjust to the road. And your turn lanes. So let's, for the sake of argument, I'm going to show you the turn lanes real quick. If I was doing a turn lane here, when you drag the turn lane out, it comes out dotted. When it goes green, put it where you want it. And now it drags that out. Now it added this lane. All you have to do to get rid of it is that. If I had to put a turn lane there. Same thing here. You can add turn lanes like that. Double turn lanes. Drag them over the line you want to replace. So if this was a double turn lane instead of a double yellow here, I drag it over that line. It'll add the lane for me. Medians work the same way. Let's say this was a freeway and I'm going to put a median here. Drag it over the line. And it replaces that. So that's Smart Roads components. Okay, so for vehicles, you notice there's two menus, vehicles and vehicle side. I always recommend you use the vehicle menu. So I'm going to grab my truck for this first part. And then this is why. So let's put this on here, for example. This is why it's better to use the top down. This car, and if I look at this diagram as a reviewer, this car is flipped on its side, which is inaccurate. Picture this from a bird's eye view. Always try and use the top-down menu. The only time you can't, and it's going to apply in this particular instance, is bicycles and motorcycles. A top-down view is not really helpful, so you have to use the side view for those two. And in this case, we have a bicyclist, so we're going to go ahead and put our bicyclist right here. And we'll come back up here to vehicles. We had a parked car in this particular case, so we're going to park a car right here. Now you'll notice these are all coming out black. Like I said, my object library up here, my stock color is black. I'll make this one orange. Okay, so here's another thing you can do to help speed things up. A lot of people will just do point of impact for their collision. They don't like drawing the progression. If you like drawing the progression, instead of putting this car on here over and over and over again out of the object library, all you have to do is either hit Control-C or right-click on it and copy it, and then come where you're going to want to put the next version of it and press Control-V. That allows you to make a lot of iterations of this car without having to draw it over and over and over again. Okay? Same thing with the bicycle. Instead of drawing it over and over again, I'm just going to draw different iterations of it. There we go. Okay, so now, and you notice I haven't done any lines, any of that yet. Get all of your objects on before you start messing with your lines and text. It's just, if you do it this way, it's, again, going back to that counterclockwise, it'll speed up the process of drawing everything for you because you're going to have everything the way you need it before you start putting lines, and you're not bouncing back and forth between these two bars. So we have our cars on here. If it's relevant to your particular collision, in this case it won't be, but I'm going to put them on there anyway. Put your signs on there. So down here under signs and lights, pretty much any sign you can think of in the state of Washington is in here. In this case, I'm going to put a stop sign right here. You drag it out, you notice it's gray. And then when I get it where I need it, there's my stop sign. Stop signs, all your school zone signs, all this stuff is in here. There are a couple custom signs here. The only custom sign I really ever use is this one right here, the Street Sign 3. Street Sign 3 looks really small. But the reason I use it, it looks like one of those cross, don't cross signs. So if you have a vehicle versus a ped where a crosswalk mattered, this is a good sign to use. And then you just draw a line to it and label it walk or don't walk, so on and so forth. But these three custom signs can be whatever you need them to be. Street Sign 1 and Street Sign 2, if I ever do use them, I use them for mailboxes. So that's just an option you have. All your street lights are down here as well, so you can put street lights on here. Just be aware, any signs you need are in that menu. And finally, we had a witness to this one, so I have to get a person. All of our people are under the Victims and Wildlife tab. Again, there are top-down and side profile. I always use the top-down view. Because again, if you put a laying down, or if you put a side view one, it looks like they're laying down in the road, which if they are, they are. So you also have a couple of body parts here if you want to get really graphic. A couple animals, cow, crocodile, deer, dog, emu, and horses. No cat. There's an emu, but no cat. So anyway, so we've got our person on there. We went through our signs and lights menu. If you have to put buildings or trees, so any of these objects like fire hydrants, buildings, trees, these are going to be under landscapes and buildings menu. I'll go ahead and put the condo here. This is just an apartment complex here on this particular intersection. If the buildings are relevant, you can put them there. You notice there are individual cones, individual pieces of guardrail, railroad track, all that stuff are in here. This is obviously why we use the line tool. These would take forever if you were trying to draw an entire cone line to do, so I don't recommend it. And then if you, let's say a car goes into a body of water, you have a river here, you can expand this out. So that's what the landscapes and buildings menu has. Drawing symbols, I call this the junk drawer. This is going to be all of the things that if you can't find them anywhere else, come here and look. These are going to be your north arrows. There's 3 different types here. Oil spills, broken glass, point of impacts. So this is going to be our point of impact here. That's going to be there. Put one here. That's what's in this drawing symbols menu. Basically, I come here for my point of impact and my north arrow. Okay, so we've gone through, we've drawn everything the way we needed it. We've put all our cars, people, point of impact signs on here. Now we just have to label this thing. So I'm going to go to my text tool first and start labeling my roads. Again, I'm not adjusting anything yet. You notice I'm not going to my fail-safe tool and adjusting all these names. I'm just throwing them on there. I want to get everything done all at once. Okay, so I have all my words on here. Now I'm going to go to my fail-safe tool and move things around and clean this up a little bit. And finally, I'm going to grab my line tool up here and start drawing my arrows. So, there to there. There to there. Again, I draw my progression lines. If you don't worry about it. Grab a solid line here, change it from red to black. You notice I keep going up here to change this color. If I'm going to draw a lot of red arrows, I don't want to have to draw 4 black arrows and then change each one of them to red. I want them all red when I start. Same thing with my labels. I want all my labels to be labeled with black. So I changed it to black before I did that. Okay, so here's my collision. Here's all of my labels on it. That's my diagram. Very simple. This is probably about as much detail as you would ever need on a diagram. You don't have to go crazy. Just draw a basic diagram that tells the story of this collision. Couple more things before I end. Up here on this top bar, don't really use them as often, but I want to show you that they're here. You have a crime menu. This is where you find FlexMan. So if you want to get really into detail with what your people are doing in your collisions, FlexMan here, when you zoom in on him, FlexMan has all these different joints in him. So you can move his arms around. You can take FlexMan's head off, I guess. You can put a little captain in FlexMan. Just be aware that's where you're going to get him if you want to really get into detail. You have some weapons in here, so if you're diagramming a scene where maybe weapons are involved, furniture, if you're diagramming the inside of a house for whatever reason, evidence, arson, clothing. This is blood spatters, keys, bullet holes, broken bottles. Just be aware this menu's here if you like to draw other things. Again, you have this print scene button up here. So let's say your agency still does like crime scenes or death investigations where an officer has to diagram it. If you want, you can come in here, use these tools, hit print scene, and print out a copy of the picture. It's just an option. This menu is all your rail cars, so anything related to a train collision, Go to this menu. It'll give you all the different types of rail cars, track symbols, stuff like that. Arson clothing evidence. This is just a continuation of that menu with the forensic evidence. Marine. This is where you're going to find all your boats. So if you're doing a boat collision or maybe a boat trailer or boat fell off in the road, this is where you're going to be able to find that. Okay, there are a few more options you can do in this. This is the basics that you're going to need to know for patrol, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Just be aware, once you're done, press OK. And your diagram will be saved down here. All you have to do to edit it is double-click on it, and it'll allow you to go right back into it. That's the basics of diagramming in Sector.